We've all been there before. We know that's a real problem. But the truth of the matter is you want to turn things around, you want to get productivity up, but in the short term at least, you have to raise taxes.
Well, I'm going to set out the individual tax policies and on spending as well at the budget. That's not what today was about.
I'm not asking about individual measures. I do understand that. I'm just asking overall, in terms of borrowing and the macro picture, you have to raise taxes.
Well, I think I was pretty clear today that the circumstances that we had a year ago, they are different today because of this. And I've been clear, there's not going to be a return to austerity. We're not going to cut capital spending because that's what previous chancellors did, and that's why we have such weak productivity. And I'm not just going to borrow more. And so, of course, we are rooted.
Imagine being Chancellor of the Exchequer, sitting down for what you hope will be a relatively friendly interview, and having the presenter straight up ask you whether resigning would be the honourable thing to do given that your economic plans are falling apart and you might need to break your manifesto promises. That is exactly what happened to Rachel Reeves when Andrew Marr asked her directly whether she should quit if she resorts to raising taxes she promised not to touch. Reeves, describing the UK economy as a mess and admitting it has been through the mill, refused on 4 separate occasions to rule out raising income tax in the forthcoming budget despite Labour's manifesto explicitly promising not to increase taxes on working people. She insisted she has been able to build a reputation and has been trusted with the public finances, which is a rather generous self-assessment given that borrowing costs have soared, growth has stalled, and the government is now preparing the public for tax rises by warning that each of us must do our bit. Marr was having absolutely none of it, asking pointed questions about whether she should resign and whether someone else might do a better job, to which Reeves could only respond by asking what would happen in financial markets if she quit. When your main argument for staying in your job is that firing you might cause chaos, you have already lost the argument. Quick favor. If you are absolutely gripped by this car crash interview where Chancellor struggles to defend a record and refuses to rule out breaking manifesto promises, hit that subscribe button right now. Over 94% of you watching have not subscribed yet. It is completely free, takes literally 2 seconds, and helps us keep bringing you these moments where British politicians get absolutely grilled and cannot find convincing answers. Cheers if you did. Now back to Reeves' terrible, horrible, no good, very bad interview. Let us start with the most extraordinary moment of the entire exchange, which is Andrew Marr asking Reeves directly whether resigning would be the honourable thing to do. That is not a softball question. That is a journalistic equivalent of walking up to someone and asking whether they are capable of doing their job. Marr clearly thinks Reeves has failed as Chancellor based on the economic data and her inability to deliver on promises, and he is giving her the opportunity to gracefully admit defeat and step aside. Most chancellors would be horrified by such a question, but Reeves stood firm and said she is not going to walk away because the situation is difficult. She was appointed as Chancellor to turn the economy around, and she is absolutely determined to finish that job. That response sounds defiant and determined, which is presumably the effect Reeves was going for. But it also inadvertently admits that the situation is difficult, which rather undermines her attempt throughout the rest of the interview to paint a picture of economic success. If things are going well, you do not describe the situation as difficult and talk about not walking away. You celebrate your achievements and point to concrete evidence of improvement. The fact that Reeves frames a determination to stay as refusing to walk away from difficulty tells you everything about how she knows the situation is perceived. Then comes Reeves' counter-argument for why she should stay, which is genuinely remarkable in its weakness. What do you think would happen in financial markets if I resigned? She asked Marr, as if the prospect of market chaos is the only thing standing between her and the exit. It depends who took over. I guess, Marr retorted brilliantly, explaining that the easy option would be to massage the figures and echo previous chancellors. That response absolutely destroys Reeves' argument because Marr is essentially saying that any competent replacement could do the job and might actually do it better by being more honest about the figures rather than trying to spin failure as success. Reeves fired back with what sounds like a prepared line. I have been able to build a reputation and have been trusted with the public finances. That claim is doing an enormous amount of heavy lifting because the question of whether Reeves has actually built a positive reputation is highly debatable. She has certainly built a reputation, but is it one of competence and trustworthiness, or is it one of overpromising and underdelivering? The evidence suggests the latter. She claimed to have steered the economy through challenging times over the last 15 months, citing increases in global tariffs, volatility, and international tensions. But every chancellor faces challenging times. That is literally the job. The question is not whether you face challenges, but whether you successfully navigate them. And the evidence on that front is not particularly encouraging for Reeves. She pointed to bond yields being lower than a few months ago and having outperformed peers, the FTSE being close to record highs, and the economy in the first half of the year being the strongest growing in the G7. These are the kind of cherry-picked statistics that politicians love because they sound impressive but do not tell the full story. Yes, bond yields have come down from their peaks, but they remain significantly higher than they were before Reeves became Chancellor. Yes, the FTSE is near record highs, but the stock market is not the economy and does not necessarily reflect the lived experience of ordinary people. Yes, the economy grew in the first half of the year, but growth is installed and the outlook is increasingly gloomy. Reeves is highlighting the brief moments of success while ignoring the broader pattern of underperformance. The most politically explosive part of the interview was Reeves refusing on 4 separate occasions to rule out raising income tax in the forthcoming budget. 4 times. Marr asked her directly, gave her multiple opportunities to provide clarity, and she refused every single time to commit to not raising income tax. Instead, she kept repeating that her number one priority is to grow the economy and that there will be no change to the triple lock on pensions. But voters do not care about what your number one priority is. They care about whether you are going to raise their taxes after promising not to. The refusal to answer speaks volumes and strongly suggests that income tax rises are coming despite Labour's manifesto explicitly promising they would not increase income tax, national insurance, or VAT. The manifesto promise could not have been clearer. We will ensure taxes on working people are kept as low as possible. It said, Labour will not increase taxes on working people, which is why we will not increase national insurance, the basic, higher, or additional rates of income tax, or VAT. That is an unambiguous commitment made to voters before the election. People voted Labour based partly on that promise, trusting that their taxes would not go up. If Reeves now breaks that promise, it represents a fundamental breach of trust between the government and the electorate. The fact that Number 10 has repeatedly refused to recommit to Labour's manifesto pledges in recent weeks tells you everything about where this is heading. Reeves put the country on notice on Tuesday with a highly unusual speech from Downing Street warning about tax rises in the budget and insisting that each of us must do our bit. That phrase, each of us must do our bit, is political code for we are going to raise your taxes and you should feel patriotic about it. She said the government will make the choices necessary to deliver strong foundations for the economy for years to come and warn millions of people that we will all have to contribute towards repairing public finances. Contribute is another euphemism for pay more tax. When politicians start talking about everyone doing their bit and contributing to shared national efforts, you know they are preparing to reach into your pocket. Reeves' explanation for why the economy is in such a terrible state is to blame everyone and everything except herself and her government. We had austerity, she said, then we had a botched Brexit. We had Liz Truss's mini-budget, and then of course there are external events like the COVID pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That is quite the list of scapegoats. Austerity happened over a decade ago. Brexit happened 8 years ago. The Liz Truss mini-budget was over 2 years ago. COVID is largely over, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine, while tragic, has been ongoing for nearly 3 years. At some point, you have to stop blaming previous governments and external events and take responsibility for your own record. Labour has been in power for over 15 months now. If the economy is still a mess, that is partly on you. The buck passing is particularly galling when Reeves attacks the Conservatives over austerity despite Labour having been in government for well over a year. At what point do you stop blaming the previous government and start being judged on your own performance? Reeves seems to think she can indefinitely blame Tory austerity, Brexit, and Liz Truss for any economic problems while taking credit for any positive economic data. That is not how accountability works. If you are going to claim credit for the FTSE being near record highs in growth in the first half of the year, you also have to take responsibility for stalling growth, high borrowing costs, and the need to raise taxes. Reeves insisted there is not going to be a return to austerity and that she is not going to cut capital spending because that is what previous chancellors did and it resulted in weak productivity. She also said she is not just going to borrow more. So if you are not cutting spending, and you are not borrowing more, the only option left is raising taxes, which is exactly what she's preparing to do despite promising not to. The mathematics are brutal and unavoidable. If you want to spend more or even maintain current spending levels, and you cannot borrow more without spoiling markets, you have to raise revenue, which means higher taxes. The entire Downing Street speech and the refusal to rule out income tax rises are about preparing the public for that reality. During Tuesday's speech, Reeves said politicians of recent years have become addicted to shelling out for short-term sticking plaster solutions rather than making long-term economic plans, which is rich coming from someone who is about to break manifesto promises made less than 18 months ago because the short-term political situation requires it. She asked what were the Tories doing for 14 years and condemned the devastating consequences of austerity. But Labour has been in power for over a year now. What have you been doing? If your answer is dealing with the aftermath and preparing to raise taxes, that is not exactly the transformative change that voters were promised. Reeves blamed years of economic mismanagement and claimed she has been dealing with the aftermath of Liz Truss's disastrous mini-budget. But here's the thing, Liz Truss was Prime Minister for about 6 weeks over 2 years ago. Her mini-budget caused a brief market panic that was quickly reversed when she was forced out. The idea that the current economic situation, over 2 years and 2 prime ministers later, can still be primarily blamed on Truss's brief tenure is absurd. It is like blaming your current financial problems on a bad decision you made 2 years ago while ignoring all the decisions you have made since then. She claimed that since her first budget last year, the world has thrown even more challenges at Britain, which again is just describing the normal experience of being Chancellor.